Making the transition to secondary school from a psychological perspective. This talk was put together by Anya Fahy, Eleanor Mason and Quillan O'Riordan, psychologists working in the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services in Carlow, Kilkenny. We put this presentation together for parents and teachers of children making the transition to secondary school. Some of the key points we will cover in this presentation include general information on adolescence, a developmental change which coincides with the transition to secondary school. We will also discuss the possible challenges that a young person might face in making these transitions and ways in which you can support your child at this time of change. When considering this transition for your child, it can sometimes be helpful to reflect on our own experiences of becoming a teenager and going into secondary school. Give yourself a few moments to privately reflect on your own experiences. How did you feel saying goodbye to primary school? What did you miss? How did you feel going in on your first day of secondary school? What did you find exciting? What did you find daunting? Was the change a positive, negative, or mixed one? What was your relationship with your parents like? And how were things in your family? How did things go with your brothers and sisters? And if you have no brothers and sisters, what was that like for you? How did friendships go? Did you know friends starting with you? Did you find it easy or hard to make new friends? Did you lose friends along the way? How did things go with the opposite sex? How did you feel about your body, your identity? How did you cope with the academic work? What aspects of learning did you find hard? How did you like to spend your time? What sparked your interest? In what ways are you like that teenager today? If you are a parent of a teenager, in what ways is your teenager similar or different to you? Just give a few moments reflecting on these thoughts.
Connecting with your own experiences may help increase your awareness of what is facing a young person making the transition to secondary school. This transition coincides with another transition from childhood to adulthood, that of adolescence. It's a period in life in which a young person moves from dependence to independence, from being part of a family group to being part of a wider peer and social group. There are many changes that occur during this time. Body changes. There is huge physical growth and development occurring both inside and outside the body. These changes can make teenagers feel awkward and self-conscious. Changes may occur gradually, or several signs may become visible at the same time. There is an area at the back of the brain called the limbic area, which is much more sensitive in adolescence than in childhood or adulthood. This increased sensitivity can lead to an increase in the range and intensity of feelings. So what that means for adolescents is that they may be struggling with really big feelings which they haven't had before. The downside of this can be increased moodiness and reactivity, but there's also an upside, increased energy, vitality, and a zest for being alive. There are also major changes in thinking during adolescence. They become capable of more sophisticated and complex thinking. They're able to think about possibilities, become more critical and questioning. And there is a creativity in the thinking of adolescence which allows for questioning of the status quo and out-of-the-box thinking. In spite of these changes, the frontal part of the brain is not yet fully developed. So teenagers are more likely to think in the short term rather than in the long term, and can overestimate the amount of influence they have on outcomes. And they may be more prone to engaging in risky behaviours. So they still need help from parents to make decisions, particularly those with long-term implications. One of the major developmental tasks of adolescents is to separate from parents. So during this time, teenagers want to spend less time with family and more time with friends. There can also be increased conflict with parents. It's important to remember, however, that family is still a secure emotional base where the teenager can feel loved and accepted no matter what's going on in the rest of his life. You might like to have a look at a brief video which outlines the brain changes during adolescence. While highlighting some of the challenges of this time, it is also noted that it is a golden time for learning, as the brain is agile and flexible and open to new opportunities, technologies and experiences. Having discussed the developmental changes of adolescence that co-occur with the transition to secondary school, we'll now give some consideration to the potential challenges that a young person may face during this time.
It's important to acknowledge some of the specific difficulties that a young person might have when making the transition from primary to secondary school. They may miss certain aspects of primary school, whether that's the atmosphere of the school that they were in, or some friends that won't be going to the same secondary school as them, or maybe a teacher that they really liked. In terms of some academic challenges, this can be a common issue for young people starting secondary school. They may have certain difficulties with reading or working with numbers. They may present with organisational issues and struggle in terms of organising themselves, their books, their timetable, their locker. They may have certain attention and concentration difficulties that can be worsened by the more intense or difficult nature of secondary school compared to what they were used to in primary. It's really important to acknowledge that the academic pressure of homework and study and exams, some of which can be quite new to many young people who wouldn't have dealt with this in primary school, this kind of pressure can lead to stress and to anxiety. For lots of different reasons, young people can find themselves getting into trouble with teachers, maybe where they hadn't previously. And this can be stressful both for the young person and for their parents. It's really important to acknowledge the pressure that can also come with extracurricular activities. Young people these days can be involved in lots of clubs and sports and groups outside of school, which are of course important, but it is worth noting that they can become overwhelmed with the amount that they have on during the week between school and other activities, and their timetable can become very full. There are, of course, social demands when it comes to transitioning to secondary school. Young people will be meeting new people, both other teenagers and new teachers. They'll be trying to make new friends, possibly branching out a bit and seeing changes in their friend groups. But along with making new friends, they may find that they lose old friends, and that can be difficult. Experiences of bullying may become a challenge, and it's important to be aware of this and to keep this in mind. Of course, the use of mobile phones and the internet is in many ways a constant challenge for young people these days. They find themselves constantly connected to others and having to negotiate social interactions and social situations all through the medium of social networking sites and apps. Family stress can come into play in the teenage years, whether the young person and their family are experiencing the loss of a grandparent or another family member, a separation, or any other issues that are going on in the home. All of these things can really impact a young person's experience. Identity and sexuality issues often become important for young people in their teens. They are starting to explore their identity more, how they think of themselves and how they see themselves fitting into the world. And so this can lead to challenges and lots of changes for some young people. Of course, we can't speak about the transition to secondary school this year without acknowledging how all of this is impacted by the current COVID-19 situation. Transition to secondary school is particularly challenging this year, of course, as children are missing out on the usual routines and rituals associated with leaving primary school. For example, most children have missed out on graduation ceremonies, school tours, final days, not being able to say goodbye in person to their friends or to their teachers or to give each other hugs. Also, young people starting secondary school are, along with their parents, facing an uncertainty as to what to expect on their first day, in their first few weeks, and even in the first few months. And this is due to the ongoing restrictions associated with COVID-19. So they don't know whether or not they'll be attending school full time, whether they'll be able to spend time with certain friends, or whether they'll be split up into particular groups. And there can be feelings of sadness for both the child and their parents associated with these missed opportunities. So bearing all of this in mind, what we want to do now is discuss how you can support your child through this transition, keeping in mind some of the challenges that we know that they might be facing. So when considering how to support your young person in making that transition from primary to secondary school, it's really important to allow them the space to speak about their feelings. Allow them to express themselves and all of their hopes, their fears, and their desires. Listen to them and validate their experiences. Studies have shown that there are two main feelings associated with starting secondary school: excitement and nervousness. The uncertainty due to current restrictions with COVID-19 is understandably going to add to this anxiety. So it's important to trust that they are resilient and they are adaptable, whilst also listening to any challenges that they may be expressing. And allow them space not just to talk about challenges, but also the opportunities. Celebrate this transition. For them, having an idea of what to expect will help with this change. We've spoken about a lot of challenges, but also there are lots of opportunities here for young people to make new friends, to try out different activities, to explore different subjects, and to have a new start in a new environment. So make sure that you encourage them to think about these opportunities. Highlight their strengths and remind them of their positive qualities and all of the things that they do well.
It is normal for teenagers to experience a level of stress during this transition period. Most teenagers will negotiate their way through these difficulties with the support of their family, friends, school, and the wider community. However, some young people may experience more challenges along the way, and this may have an impact on their mental health. Parents know their child well and will generally pick up on the signs that they are in distress, which can present itself in different ways depending on the child. As a parent, we encourage you to keep an eye out for changes in your child that might indicate increasing distress. Look out for changes in their sleeping and eating habits, for loss of interest in self-care or previously enjoyed activities, for withdrawal from friends or a decrease in academic performance or an increase in behavioural problems. Other potential warning signs include increased anxiety levels, disturbed thought patterns, self-harming behaviour, and alcohol or drug misuse. Some of these in isolation may not be a cause for concern, but if your child's distress starts impacting on their overall functioning and quality of life, that is, their happiness at home, at school, and in their peer relationships, then it may be time to talk to your child's GP about the supports that are available. It is important to know that there is help available. The transition to secondary school may also come at a time when parents may be going through challenges in their own lives. For example, caring for an elderly parent, financial pressures, or relationship difficulties. As a parent, self-care is important in making sure your own needs are met, in enabling you to be able to respond to your child's needs without feeling overwhelmed, in modelling to your child the importance of looking after themselves, and in building resilience to cope with stressful life events. Parents are containers for their children's emotions. They need to look after their own needs to ensure their container has space to meet the needs of their child. Self-care is anything you enjoy doing that helps make you happy. There are many different self-care strategies. For example, watching or participating in sporting activities, creative activities such as music, art, baking, reading or writing, being around nature such as going for a walk, gardening, connecting with family and friends and enjoying a meal together. Figure out what works best for you. We hope that you have found this talk helpful, and we wish you and your child the best of luck in making the transition to secondary school. Thank you for listening, and take care.